And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on whatever time you logging on watching the video. This is a question that is concerning what we call the income approach to value. And this is what this you would see this on um income producing properties. All right. So the question asks you, and the likelihood that you get something like this on a test, it may be high. You might get one question like this on a test. But the thing that I want to point out about this question is you're doing the same thing as the down payment questions that I text everybody out. You're doing the same type of math. It's just the numbers and the numbers are going to be what they are, but the variables are just going to be called something different. So in this, I really want to explain to you what this approach is and why when you use this. And so let's read the question first. A property has a potential gross income of $200,000. Let's stop right there. I want to give you an example. Let's say you are getting ready to buy a apartment building, and you want to know what's the most that I can get. You want to know what's the most I can get for that apartment building. That's the gross income. What's the gross potential income of that building? So say for instance, you got 4 units. Each unit is renting for $1,000. So that's 4,000 a month, 48,000 a year. Right? So the gross potential income, and then you think you can't get not a dime more than 1,000, but you feel comfortable with knowing that you can get 1,000. So the gross potential rent for that building is $48,000 annually. That's the gross potential rent. But that's the key, gross potential rent. So when you buy an apartment building, do you just charge rent and get to keep it all? No. You have other variables or expenses that you have to account for. I'm going to show y'all on the spreadsheet that I designed for this. It was like a 60-unit apartment building, and it's just going to help y'all see it better. All right, so let me get that. Give me a second. Let me find it, and then I'll share it with y'all. And let me find this here. All right. It should be right here. So this is something I designed for this guy. Let me make sure ain't no names or anything up here. Okay, so we're gonna take that out. All right. This is gonna be a lot of stuff, but it's only certain things I want y'all to pay attention to on the sheet. All right, so this is the sheet, and it's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of numbers on here, and it's a lot. But the income that I just told you, that gross potential income, this apartment building, based on the units, it was 20 units, had the ability to command $624,000 annually, the gross rent. But what do we have to account for? We got to account for other ways that building can make money. Let me give you an example. If say if you got a 60-unit apartment building, each building might have a laundry facility in it that cash flows, that where you got it's a coin operated washing machine. People put money in there. That's another type of income that's coming in, right? So you gotta account for all of the income that this building that you're about to buy is going to command. If you got a four-suiter, you might have a laundry facility in the basement that's coin operated. So you may be able to generate an additional $3,000 or $4,000 a year on the operation of those coin laundry machines. All right, you got to account for that because that's income coming into the property, and it's income that the property can produce. So the first thing we got to do when we have an investment property is we got to account for all the income, all the apartment income, all of the coin operated, whatever other income that it might be. You might even have income coming in from late fees. It's hard to project late fees because you don't know that income until it's late. So that's why we don't necessarily include that in here. But we have to determine what the gross potential income for the property is. That's what they mean by the first part of this question. How much is that property able to command in terms of getting income and producing income? So the first part of the question is a property has a potential gross income of 200,000. What is that? That's the rents and any other income that that property can produce. That's the gross income that that property is able to produce. Now, let's move to the next step. A 5% vacancy rate. Okay. Well, very rarely does somebody have the entire building rented. Maybe they got a vacancy here and maybe they got a vacancy there. So you got to account for vacancy. So let's go on our sheet back to that spreadsheet and look at how I accounted for vacancy on that spreadsheet. All right, so vacancy was accounted on the next line. So what this is called, when you hear gross potential income, that means something. That's a definition. What gross potential income means is it's the income that's produced by the rents and any other income. So when you hear that, you should know gross potential income is all the income that that property is capable of producing. Boom, right there. But we got to start taking stuff out because we might have vacancies, we might have lost, somebody might not have paid us and stuff like that, right? So on this building, I projected his vacancy to be up here 7%. Now, where do you determine what the vacancy is? A vacancy is a market-driven statistic. So you have to go to other data sources to figure out what the vacancy is for that market that that building is in. In the market that this building was in, is the property similar to my property, vacancy was about 7%. So I'm going to assume that we're going to have a similar type of vacancy. So I want to account for that, right? I'm going to account for that. And if you look here, I changed it to 7%, but this is really reflective of 6%. But and I'm gonna just change it back now because I must have been showing somebody something on this. And this is more reflective of 6%. All right. So we got our gross potential income. So, but now we got to start taking out other things that we got to account for. One of them is vacancy. All right. So we got to account for vacancy. And then we got to account for anything else that we lose on the property in terms of our rents, like lost rent. Somebody didn't pay us. Somebody, pretty much that's what it means. Somebody did not pay us. So we got to account for that. When we account for that, that new number, the 604, when we took out the vacancy and the lost income, is called the effective gross income. The only two things that will give you the effective gross income is vacancy and lost income, credit loss or something like that they may call it. But once you take those two variables out, that new number is called the effective gross income. So now let's go back to the problem. The problem reads a vacancy rate of 5%. Now they trip you up and go back and say, and $10,000 of additional income. So now, right? So now we know this 10,000 has to be added into this. So it's really 210,000 as the gross potential income, right? So let's just work this out on a, so now what we know is we got to understand these definitions right here. And it's not that hard. In order to, you got to know what it is, what does it mean to have gross potential income? So this is what I want to do, y'all, so y'all can see it. And I'll have somebody else tell y'all. And all we're going to do is type in what is gross potential income. And that's a definition right here. Gross potential income is all that's known as gross scheduled income. Represents the maximum income a property can generate if fully rented at market rates, including all income sources like rent, parking, and laundry facilities. Parking would be another income producing thing. If you're charging for parking and all that stuff got to be added in to get the gross potential income, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to ask what is effective gross income. Effective means that we took something out. Effective gross income, what does that mean? EGI, or effective gross income, is the total income a property generates, including rental income and other sources, minus the allowances for vacancy and credit loss. So you see what I mean? When you hear effective gross income, you know that's the potential gross income minus two variables, the vacancies and credit loss. All right. So now we know what effective gross income is. We're not going to go any further than that for this example because that's all they're asking us. So when we go back to this sheet, I'm going to copy this question and we're going to go and we're going to figure this out. Let's get rid of this here. Paste the question in there. All right, and what we do is we unpack it. The property has a potential gross income of 200,000. So we're gonna go right down here, potential gross income. $200,000. Let's keep reading. We can get rid of this part of the question. That's done. We done with that. We accounted for that. What we're trying to do is turn it into many questions. A vacancy rate of 5%. 5% vacancy. Let's do it like this. All right, we can get rid of that part of the question. An additional income of $10,000. See, they didn't want to tell us that because we need to know that additional income is added to the other income. And this is what they're testing us on. Do we know that we got to take that 10,000 and add it to the 200,000? All right. Because if you don't, you're gonna try to take the vacancy rate out of the 200,000, and that'll be wrong. So additional income is $10,000. All right. So now what do we do? The first step is we got to figure out the gross potential income, and we can get rid of that part of the question. So what they're asking us is calculate the gross potential income. Well, what is gross potential income? It's effective gross income. What is effective gross income? It's all of the income the property that can be produced minus the vacancy rate and credit loss. That's what effective gross income is. So the first step that we need to do is figure out our gross potential income. All right, our gross potential income is 210,000. But we're gonna take 200,000 plus the 10. Let's just show the math. Plus the 10,000. That equals 210. I'm not going to use no dollar signs. This is just going to be quick. So now we got the 210. So now remember when we just did those down payment questions? It's the same math now. 210 divided by, multiplied by 5%. Let's go to our calculators and figure out what that is. We go to our calculator. And got to clear it first. And we're going to take 210 times 5%. That's $10,500 equals $10,500. Now what we're going to do is take our 210, because guess what? We know what effective gross income is. It's the gross potential income minus vacancy and credit loss. So they didn't give us any credit loss, because if credit loss was in there, we would have had to figure that out too. All right. So we need to do that minus, and it's going to equal, what is 210 minus, and I'm still on my calculator, so let me share my screen, the right screen. So this is what I just typed. 210 minus 10.5. What does that equal? All right. So we go 210 minus 10,500. And that equals 199,500. And that's the exact answer that we're going to be looking for when we go back to the test. All right. So we're looking for 199,500. So now it's not on there, right? It's not on there. So what this tells me, I'm interested to see because this is the wrong way. This additional income should be added in here to calculate that. But for some reason, they're not having us do that. So now our answer isn't on here. And so when we see the answers, it may be a bunch of wrong answers over here because this is not how you do it, period. Um, when you got additional income, that goes into the gross potential income, and the effective gross income comes out of that. So it's the answer is not what we're seeing on our calculator. So okay, cool. We're gonna say okay, cool. And we're gonna go back to the calculator and bring up the calculator. So now let's do it on 200,000, right? So we go 200,000 times times 5%. That's 10,000. The only answer that I'm gonna answer on here, because here's the thing. Let me get back to the question. Well, we know it ain't 200,000 because we know that that's the gross potential income. They just told us that here, so we gonna line through that. We're gonna keep 190, and we know it's not 210 because we know this additional income plus that is that's 210. But we got to take out this 5%. We know, so we know it's not that. And I'm just not gonna pick 180. So it got to be 190. And I want to know why they didn't include the 10,000 in there. All right, they said 200,000 is the now, they said I don't know how 200,000 is the gross potential income. All right, because they probably told us to round it. That's probably what it is. That's remember our answer was 199,500. That was the right answer, but they didn't put the right answer up here. And that's BS, y'all. I can't do nothing about the test if that's what they're gonna do. The answer should have been one. It ain't you don't round income. That's just like you working and your boss says you made $989 today, but we gonna round it down to 900. Or we gonna round it up. I mean, if they round it up, great. But the answer in math should be objective and they shouldn't do this on the test. Now watch what they say right here. Watch what they say. And that's I can't do I like if they're doing that, then it's like we're gonna get those wrong. Right? Listen, this is what they say. To solve this question, we need to understand the concept of effective gross income. In real estate, EGI is calculated by taking the potential gross income of a property, subtracting any lost income due to vacancies, known as vacancy and credit loss, and then adding the income that property generates. The formula to calculate EGI is effective gross income equals potential gross income minus vacancy and credit loss plus annual income. All right. So let's do this equation here. So maybe I'm wrong. Let's do this equation. Let's see what it comes up to. See, this is wrong. This is wrong right here. That's the problem that's wrong right here. That additional income is the potential gross income for that property. You're taking the vacancy out of all of that. But what they're saying probably so this is real technical. I don't hopefully y'all won't get a question about that. What they're saying is why are we going to take vacancy out of the additional income for parking and all of that stuff? But I'm taking vacancy out of everything. So they want you to take vacancy out of just the rental income. All right. They want that's what they did here is 5% that equals 10,000. That's what it is. So what they wanted us to do, just for the calculation, what they wanted us to do, and I disagree with it, because nobody's going to do it that way. But this is what they're saying, right? And let me share my calculator with y'all real quick. All right, so this is what they want us to do. They want us to take the 200,000 times the 5%. Get that as a number, okay? 10,000 is coming out for the vacancies. So now we got the one. So now we got the 190 plus our additional income of 10,000. What they're saying is they don't want any of the vacancy to come out of that number. So that's how do you get the 200,000. I get it. At least we are able to do that. So what they're saying is the vacancy should only come out of the potential gross income on this test. I don't do it like that. I take my potential gross income that property can produce and take the vacancy out of that. Here's why I do it that way. If I'm vacant 5%, that means 5% of the people aren't using the laundry, aren't paying for the parking, and aren't paying for the other things. So why am I going to separate that and take that out the rent, not the other income? Because if the other income that's being produced accounts for 100% of the people, right? I need to account for 5% people of those people gone. So I'm going to take that out of the income as well. That's just me. But at least we can see what the main thing about this problem is understanding what gross potential income is and effective gross income is. Those are definitions. So if you can remember for the test that gross potential income means all the income the property can produce, plus any additional income, including laundry facilities, parking, you might have fees for pets and stuff like that. All of that stuff is included in how much can this building make with all of my revenue streams being accounted for. That's your gross potential income. Out of that number, the next thing you have to do is account for vacancies and credit loss or income loss. That number, once you account for that, is called the gross effective gross income. All right. And that's the key to this question is knowing what gross potential income includes and knowing what effective gross income includes once you take out the vacant, what that is. Once we get the effective gross income, then we start taking out all the expenses. And then the next thing that we need to know is what this thing called net operating income. But we're not there yet because we haven't did a question on it. But in this instance, and I just disagree with them, but for the test, this is PSI. They want you to take this 5% out of the 200,000. And we did get a lot of people getting this thing wrong. You shouldn't see 32, what's that? 32, almost 41% of the people got it wrong. And it's mainly because of the way they treated this $10,000. They want us to take this 5% vacancy rate out of the 200,000, but that's not even all the income. So that's at least we were able to identify it. This is probably a poor question. Again, they got a bunch of questions in here and they got to ask this question. So some of them are worse than the others. But this video is going to be for us understanding how we get to gross potential income and how we get to effective gross income. And we had a little snafu, we had a little mistake there. But I disagree with them because I think you got to account for that 5% out of all your income because that 5% isn't there if it's vacant. It's just not vacant in the rents. It's vacant in everything that you would be charging somebody for because they're not there. So that's just my opinion on it. This is how they're saying do it. I disagree, and we'll keep it moving. And the other thing is, let's see if this is the EGI formula. I'm gonna end this video and then I'm gonna go back and see if this is the EGI formula in the book. So I'm gonna stop the share. I'm gonna stop the recording.